Hi there.
Hello.
I'm Laura. I'm the chaplain on this floor. What's your name?
My name's Lil.
Hi, Lil. How are you doing today?
I've had better days.
Yeah. I heard that you had requested some information on advance directives. Is that right?
Yes.
One of the most stressful times to make important life or death decisions is during an actual medical emergency. The person having the emergency, his or her family and loved ones, and the healthcare providers are under very critical, time-sensitive pressures during an emergency. One of the best times to make these decisions is when the person is not having a medical emergency and can take the time to reflect on what they would want their family and medical providers to do for them in a crisis situation. This video will give you the tools you need to successfully assist patients in executing legal documents related to their end-of-life care. These documents are called advance directives. The Patient Self-Determination Act is a federal law regarding advance directives. It requires medical facilities that receive Medicaid and Medicare funds to have procedures for handling a person's advance directive and to tell individuals upon admission about their rights under state law to use advance directives. North Carolina has 3 ways for you to make formal advance directives. First, the advance directive for natural death or a living will. Second, the healthcare power of attorney. And third, advance instruction for mental health treatment. Each year, the spiritual direction staff of WakeMed Raleigh Hospital assists hundreds of patients in executing the first 2 of these documents, advance directive for natural death or living will, and healthcare power of attorney. We don't assist our patients with any other type of legal documents, just the advance directive for natural death, called living will. Laura, how did you know to go to this patient's room?
Well, I received a chip order in this case, but sometimes I'll get a page from a nurse, and it just will say advance directives, or they will tell me they want healthcare power of attorney.
And what are some of the first steps that you do once you get a chip order to go to a patient's room?
Right, so I always put together this brochure, and then I don't know what form they want sometimes, so I will take a healthcare power of attorney form and a living will, and then I'll just tuck them into this, and this basically explains in really understandable terms what these forms do and mean, and then I will take them and drop them off with the patient. And a lot of times they don't want me to be there when they read through it and try to figure out and discuss with their family members. And so I'll let them know, tell your nurse to page me or the on-call chaplain when you're ready to talk about it or ready to sign.
Do they often want you to go ahead and do it though?
Sometimes they do. And if we do that, I'll just sit down with them and I'll go through the form. One of the challenges I run into though is if there's a lot of family members in there and they're trying to do a healthcare power of attorney form, sometimes the family members will tell the patient what they want, and so sometimes I'll have to politely ask for them to leave, or I'll just tell them I'll come back later in the day.
Why did you have this done at this time?
Well, in my family, we've had a lot of sudden accidents and deaths and things like that, and I know how hard it is to make decisions in those moments, so I thought that I'm not married, I don't have any children, and I thought this was something that could make it easier for my family to do.
Did you find the process stressful?
No. Sometimes thinking about all the different choices you have on the form was a little bit stressful, just trying to figure out what I really wanted to do and thinking about the situations that might happen, because you don't know why you're going to die or when you're going to die.
Did you read the forms before the chaplain came?
No, but she left them for a minute and I got to read them then and go over them.
And did you find her going over the forms helpful to you? Did that explain or answer your questions?
It did. It was very helpful.
Could you tell us about those forms? How would a chaplain assist a patient in doing those forms?
Sure. So our hospital offers 2 forms, the advance directive for a natural death or living will, and the healthcare power of attorney. First form I'll go over is called a desire for natural death or a living will. And this is what it looks like on the top. So, and just to keep in mind, the patient has to be the one filling this out, and if they cannot write, then you need to be in the room filling it out for them. So, or having someone dictate, they can dictate and someone can write. The first line, you just fill out their name, so that's the second thing after the county, and we will zoom in on this so you can see more clearly. The second gives 3 different scenarios of when this form will be utilized by the physician. The first one has to do with an irreversible condition that may result in a person's death. The second one has to do with if they're in a permanent coma. And then the third one has to do with if they have dementia. The second part on this form is the thing that gets a little bit confusing because there's a 1-word difference. So on number 2, you can only initial in one space. The difference is between the words are may or shall. So what it's saying is, in the situations they listed in number 1, should you direct that your healthcare provider may withhold or withdraw life-prolonging measures, or they shall. So the difference between those is they can or they must. And that's very important to note and let the patient know when they're signing. The third one has to do with artificial nutrition and hydration. Sometimes patients don't know what that means, so make sure you say food and water. You can only initial the top one or one of the 2 bottom ones. You can't initial the top and then one of the bottom because that will cancel each other out. So the first one is you would want to receive both food and water, and the second is just food, and the third is just water. So make sure they initial those, and make sure they read 4 and 5 on their own. The 6th one is also really important, especially if they have a spouse or their legal next of kin in the room, because what it says is it gives you the option to let the legal next of kin override whatever this form says, or it allows for this form to override and have the final word in making a healthcare decision on behalf of the person. So make sure they read through question number 7. Question number 8, because there's nothing for them to sign, but it's important that they read. And then they cannot fill anything out after number 9 until you have a notary and 2 witnesses present. And the back page really is for the notary to be in charge of, but I always put a 1 and a 2 here because the witnesses have to put their name and then also sign. And so the way they won't get confused is if you just have witness number 1 here and witness number 2 here, and then they can do both. But the notary really does most of the work on the back. And then after you're done, make a copy for the patient, put a copy in their chart, and then write in the process notes that you've completed the advance directive. And then if maybe a family member wants a copy as well, they can have one. So that is the living will. So the second form that we offer is the healthcare power of attorney form, and similar to the living will, it's Wake County always, so you can fill it out before you go to see the patient. The point of this form is to give authority to someone to make healthcare decisions on the patient's behalf if they are unable to make their own decisions. So below are 3 options to list people. If the patient only wants to list one person and not all 3, what you need to do is make sure that they cross out the second 2 so that someone can't go back later and fill that out. Sometimes the patients are worried if they don't know the work number or the cell phone number of the person. So what we really need is their name, and if we have their address, and if they do have a phone number, that's great, but it's not necessary. Okay, the second question on here allows for the patient to fill out a specific physician that they would want. Now it says the authority granted in this document shall become effective when and if one of the physicians listed below determines that the patient doesn't have enough mental capacity or communicative capacity to make their own decisions. A lot of patients don't fill this out, especially if the document lasts a long time and the physician may not be practicing anymore. Some people put attending physician on there, but if you don't list anyone, again, cross it out, which I will do. Numbers 3 and 4 don't require any signatures, but I would, again, recommend that they read through each part of it, and if they have questions, they can ask you. Now, number 5 gets a little bit confusing because there are a lot of double negatives. and it has different boxes that you can fill out. And in this form and the living will, a lot of people end up crossing out the boxes. These limitations or specific provisions guide the healthcare power of attorney for what they cannot do. The first one is about artificial nutrition and hydration. So what it says is, in exercising the authority to make healthcare decisions on my behalf, my healthcare agent, the first one is, shall not have the authority to withhold artificial nutrition, or may exercise that authority only in accordance with the following special provisions. Most people cross this out, but if they do have a special provision, for instance, after 30 days, then they can exercise that authority. So maybe they want the feeding tube in for a certain amount of time, they should fill it out. If they don't give a provision, they only need to initial if they put something in here, or if they want to give a limitation. And it says in bold, if they have any confusion, if you initial either block and do not insert provisions, then your healthcare agent will have no authority to withhold nutrition or hydration. Part B is talking about limitations concerning healthcare decisions. It says, in exercising the authority to make healthcare decisions, my healthcare agent is subject to the following provisions. And there you give really specific provisions, if maybe your own definition of what is a life-prolonging measure and when that should be withheld. If you do not put a limitation in Part B, they do not need to initial it. So make sure that if they don't do that, we're going to cross that out. Part C says limitations concerning mental health decisions. This one says, in exercising the authority to make mental health decisions on my behalf, my healthcare agent is subject to specific provisions. And there, the patient needs to list very specific instructions regarding the administration of psychotropic medications. So if there's something going on mentally, if they have dementia, and they want to give specific limitations to their healthcare agent, they would list them. And again, for this section, they do not initial unless they list something specific. And then the last two parts of question 5, Part D is about more advanced instructions for mental health treatment. This relates to Part 2 of Article 3 in 122C of the General Statutes. So if they've read this and know that under these certain medical conditions, the healthcare agent can or cannot make these decisions, and they still want to list a limitation, they can do that here. But again, this says do not initial unless there's a limitation. And then the last one in Part 5 is about autopsy and disposition of remains. So the authority to make decisions regarding my autopsy, my healthcare agent is limited or needs special provisions for. And then in this part, they can fill out something like a very specific instruction regarding their burial or their cremation if they were to die. And if they don't list anything, do not initial and make sure you make an X through the whole box. Okay, question number 6 is about organ donation. And I would just make sure, when I'm with a patient, sometimes that really scares them because maybe they're not in a place where they think they're going to die. So I'm always just really sensitive when it comes to talking about organ donation, especially if there are family members in the room that might have some anxiety about that. Now, this first part of question 6 talks about donating organs or parts, and then only donating any that may be viable. And the second one is only specific ones. Some people are really protective of their bodies, and so they get really nervous about donating everything. So you can only initial one or the other. Do not initial both. And again, it says, to the extent that I have not already made these decisions on my own during my life, my healthcare agent may exercise. So this is giving the authority for them to either donate whatever is viable or to donate what the patient has listed. The second part of this is to donate their body for scientific study. A lot of people get really freaked out by that one. So if they get scared about that, you don't need to have them fill that out. And the last one is about if they want to donate a specific organ as a gift to someone. So if they have a niece or something who needs a kidney, they can say, this is only for someone in my family. And that's a very specific limitation again. But they do not need to initial that if they don't list a limitation. They can cross it out. And then make sure that you note that no authority for organ donation is granted in this instrument without the initials. So parts 7, 8, and 9 do not require any initials, but I would recommend, again, that everything is read in detail. And if the patient cannot read it on their own or they're confused by it, sometimes I just read it out loud, and that does take a long time, but it is necessary for them to understand what they're signing. And then similar to the living will, at the end, you cannot fill any of this stuff out unless there's a notary and 2 witnesses present. And the notary basically fills out the back side as well. And so again, once you have your 2 witnesses, I would number where they need to print and sign so that way no one is confused. And then the notary will fill out the rest of this and then stamp it. And that is the healthcare power of attorney form.
How do you get witnesses? Where do you go? What are some of the ways that you could find witnesses in this hospital?
Yeah, and that depends on where the patient is. So if I'm in OBS 3, I might have to go into a room next door, and maybe I've already met with that patient or have a rapport with the family, so it's not very difficult. And I do always, or I'll go to a waiting room if it's, OBS 3 doesn't have a waiting room. So if I was in an ICU, I would go to critical care waiting room and ask people. And I always tell them that it's not legally binding if you have your driver's license, and if you could just take a couple minutes of your time.
Hi y'all, sorry to bug you. I'm the chaplain here, and we're doing some advanced directives in the room over there. And I'm wondering if I could ask both of you to be witnesses when the patient signs the form. If you guys have your driver's licenses on you.
Yeah, I do. What's a witness?
So basically, they just need someone to watch the person sign so that it can be notarized. It doesn't require you to it's not legally binding or anything. It just would be a volunteer service to help this patient have the form legally.
Spiritual care, this is Jan.
Hi Jan, this is Laura. Yeah, I need a notary for some advanced directives.
Where are you?
I'm on 5A17.
17. And do you have witnesses already?
I do, I have 2 witnesses here.
Okay, I'll be there in a few minutes.
Okay, thanks.
When you first get a call to come to do advanced directives, what information do you need in order to respond to that call?
The chaplain needs to give me the information of where he or she is, what unit she's in, he or she is in, with the room number, and whether they have witnesses or not already to witness the document that's going to be notarized. Hey, are you Laura,
Hi.
the chaplain?
Yes, are you Jan?
I am.
Okay.
The notary.
These are our witnesses. We can go in.
What are you looking for when you walk in the room? What information do you need?
One of the first things that I need to do is verify who the patient is to make sure that this is the person that he or she says she is.
And how do you do that?
You can do that by looking at their hospital ID badge. Some will ask for a license ID
Okay.
to verify that the patient is who he or she says she is.
All right.
or
And
he
what
is.
about the witnesses? How do you verify?
The witnesses are gathered to the room by the chaplain before I get there. They should already be in place. And I verify their identities also with their driver's license.
Okay. And then when it pertains to the form itself, what are you looking for? What's the first thing that you look for?
One of the first things I'm going to look for is to make sure that it's been filled out, that the chaplain has walked through the information on the document with the patient, and that that person has designated who they want to be their healthcare power of attorney. I also am looking for that they have filled out their wishes on the form by checking the appropriate boxes. I also would hope that the chaplain has already gone through and discussed it, and also where the patient didn't fill in something, that those boxes have been X'd out. So that no one, or crossed out, so that no one can come back and fill in any information after we've done this.
Okay.
I'm also looking for the back, on the back page, this is a really important page because this doesn't need to be filled out any at all until the notary gets there. And this is done in the presence of witnesses. The patient will sign their name in the presence of the witnesses and the notary. And once that is done, I will take the witnesses out to a nurse's station or another table area, and we'll finish and complete this so that they can sign and date that they witnessed the signature. Yeah. First of all, I need to see your IDs, a picture ID. All right, thank you. Thank you. Mr. Witt, you're going to be number 1 here. If you'll just date and sign where it says number 1, and also print your name right there. Thank you. And you're going to be witness number 2. If you'll date and sign, and then print your name there. That's all I need. Thank you for doing this for us.
Thank you.
No problem.
Why do you think chaplains are involved with this process?
Yeah, that's a good question. So a lot of times people conflate this with a DNR, and it's not. This is something that I think elicits a lot of theological and spiritual questions from patients. Like, what is quality of life? What does it mean for me to receive artificial nutrition, hydration? What does it mean for me to designate someone else to put my life in their hands? What would God want? And maybe they don't ask those questions, but sometimes they're in the back of their mind. And maybe they're not religious, but I think that it is important that we are pastorally sensitive, and we are aware of maybe some of the possibilities of questions for them to figure out what's going on. I would say with a DNR, that might bring up similar questions, but it's so immediate, whereas this is if they're in a coma, so it could be a long, drawn-out process.
You say to recommend this process to other patients.
Well, I just think at the time of death, it's really difficult for people to make decisions, and if I've already thought about mine, what I want done, then it's easier for my family, and they're not put in the position of wondering what I would want to do, or guessing what might be best at that time.
Well, I hope everything goes well for you.
Thank you.
Say it again, look happier.
Don't get me started laughing. Please don't do that, Cody. Don't do that, please. Okay, just step aside. Okay. We're about to start again. Oh, it's already going. Okay, it's already going, people.
Ask her about what she does when she's looking for witnesses.
How do you get witnesses? Where do you go? What are some of the ways that you can find witnesses in this hospital? And that depends on where the patient is. So if I'm in Ops 3, I might have to go into a room next door. And maybe I've already met with that patient, or I have a rapport with the family, so it's not very difficult. And I do always, or I'll go to a waiting room if it's Ops 3 doesn't have a waiting room. So if I was in an ICU, I'd go to critical care waiting room and ask people. And I always tell them it's not legally binding if you have a driver's license. And if you just
Say that again.
I thought it was very, am I supposed to be looking at here?
Yeah.
I thought it was very helpful.